Gemara, we're learning now Daf Nun Hey Amud Al. The Gemara was discussing the halacha of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said that although when the person who was mocked to something is paid his hektish, he has to add 20%. If he wants to be paid to something that he already used to be paid to hektish, so let's call it second generation hektish, there you don't add 20%. And the Gemara wanted to bring a raya to this halacha from Ibraisa that quoted a pasuk, Vimba behema atmeo. The Gemara wanted to darshan that Tchilas Hektish is going to be Moshe Chaimish, but Soif Hektish is not Moshe Chaimish, and Emta Hektish is not Moshe Chaimish. Because it says Ba Behema Atmeya, the extra Ba Behema tells us that the only thing that's a Moshe Chaimish are things that are like a Behema Atmeya, and those two characteristics are that they're Tchilas Hektish and it's Kula L'Shamayim. The Gemara asks, what do you mean that you cannot have a Behema Atmeya by Emta Hektish? Avadi you could. Amalei Levisha B'Soif Hektish. A behemoth tamei can't be soif hektish because you're not going to be makriv it as a carbon. It's ultimately going to be sold. Omali Rabachim Medivti L'Ravina. The emtza hektish mia isa, but a behemoth tamei could still be emtza hektish, and if that's the case, nami chaimish. So maybe even the second generation hektish, you should also have to add a chaimish to it when you're paid it. Amrlei told him, Hareu k'soif hektish. Emta hektish is like soif hektish, and ma soif hektish ain't a moisav chaimish. Just like soif hektish ain't a moisav chaimish because you're not paid it, you're makar it. Of emta hektish, so too, emta hektish, which is second generation hektish, ain't a moisav chaimish. Amalei Rav Zutra b'Reida of Mori Larvina. My chazos the medamas like the soif hektish. Why should you compare emta hektish to soif hektish and say that it doesn't? You don't add a chaimish. Nidami let chilas hektish and say that you do add a chaimish. Amalei mistaver lesoif hektish. Why? It's more mistaver to compare emta hektish to soif hektish and say that you don't add a chaimish. Shekei nitvas minitvas. We're going to learn something that you already used to be paida from something that you already used to be paid. Zok Gemara Adarabba. L'tchilas hektish havelei l'dmuyei. We should have compared it to tchilas hektish. Shekein davar sheyesh acher of kedusha midavar sheyesh acher of kedusha. We should learn something that has a kedusha after it, meaning it's paid to something else. It could be nifta and make something else kadosh from something sheyesh acher of kedusha, which would be like this rishon, and he should have to pay a chaimish. Zok Gemara, you know why emta hektish doesn't add a chaimish? The Amar Rava. Rava said that ha'oila oila rishon, when it speaks about the carbon dioxide tamid, it calls it ha'oila, the oila with the heyediyah. It tells that it's the first oila. So hakanami in our posuk it says ha'tameya with the heyediyah to tell us tameya rishon. The first generation hektish, that is what you have to add a chaimish for. But you don't have to add a chaimish when you're being paida second generation hektish. Hayikam Osei Rav Shua ben Levi. Parazu takas partial hektish. This para should redeem this para of hektish, or talasu takas talas hektish, or this talas should redeem this talas of hektish, and no amount of money was specified. The halacha is hekdeshay pod. The pigeon works, but the yad hektish al hel yoyin. If the animal that you're using to be paid to the hektish animal is worth more, so hektish benefits. And if it's worth less, then you still have to pay the difference. What about padazu b'chomesh shloim tachas parashal hektish, or talasu b'chomesh shloim tachas talasal hektish? You say this that's worth 5 shloim should be instead of the item of hektish. So Rashi says it has the same halacha is the case before, that Akdoshe Padui, and it works. And the Chiddush is, even though he designated that it's worth 5 shleim and it's really not, it still works. And here is the main focus of where we're bringing a raya from this brisa to Rabbi Shimon Levi. And it says as follows: Al hektish sheni, al hektish rishon moisef chaimish, and al hektish sheni ein moisef chaimish. So that's how you see clearly, like Rabbi Shimon Levi. Zok the Heilige Mishnah, changing the subject a little. Hayno arba kesef. Hayno is 4 kesef, and we learned earlier that is the share of 1/6. V'atayna shtei kesef. When you're loaning somebody money and he denies it and he makes a shvuah and the Torah says you have to bring a carbon asham and pay keren v'chaimish, that's only if the discussion about how much money was involved is a minimum of 2 kesef. V'haidah shavar pruta. And the haidah, because someone's being moed to be mixed over here, that's why he's mechuyev b'shvuah, he has to be moed on at least a pruta, or he has to deny at least a pruta. Zoktim berchamish pruta say. There's 5 halachas that involve a pruta. Haidah shavar pruta, which we just discussed about their carbon shvuah. Isha miskadeshes b'shavar pruta. A woman is miskadeshes b'shavar pruta. On the henna b'shavar pruta, there's a chiv me'ilah that you pay back keren v'chaimish v'asham. That's what the shavar pruta. Min hektish v'han the henna b'shavar pruta the hektish mol there's me'ilah. V'hamoitzi shavar pruta chayiv l'hakris. How much does an aveda have to be worth that you're chayiv to be metabel with it and announce it 1 shavar pruta? And v'agozil is chaver shavar pruta v'nish beloy and swore in order to have a kapara is yoylichenu acharav afilu l'madai. Even if he owes 1 pruta, he has to run all the way to mother, even necessary, to deliver the money back. So those are the 5 halachas that are the give by a pruta. Why does our Mishnah need to tell us that I know is 4 kesef, which is 1/6? We just learned it in the Mishnah earlier. I know arba kesef me'esrim ve'arba kesef l'sela, which is shtus l'mekach. In fact, that case in our Mishnah is extra. But since it says hataynish de kesef, v'haidah shavar pruta, since it listed that, it listed this as well. It's trichalei, that's why it said it. But for hanami tanina, the case of hataynish de kesef, v'haidah shavar pruta, we also looked at the different Mishnah, so we don't need that either, because it says shvus hadayanim hataynish de kesef, v'haidah shavar pruta. So Kimar, you're right. You know why we listed this off? Because of the Sefer. Sefer is trichalei de katani chamish pruta say. Since the Tana was telling us about the 5 halachas, the Bava pruta, that's why it repeated Aino and Gzela that they're also involving a pruta. Chamish pruta say. Frank Gemara, if a list me nami Aino pruta, why doesn't it list off Aino as a pruta as well? Amrav Kahana Zoy say Maris ain Aino la prutais. You see from our Mishnah that Aino does not apply to prutais; it only applies to greater amounts, like our Mishnah says. The Levi Amar Yeshen al prutas. The factor is enough for prutas. V'chein Tani Levi b'masni say, and Levi actually had a different price that he quoted, and he had a different set of 5 prutas. Chamesh pruta saying Hayna pruta, V'haidah pruta, V'kedusha isha pruta, V'gezel pruta, V'yeshivas hadayanim pruta. Yeshivas hadayanim means Bezdin will not convene unless the discussion is about at least a pruta. My time why didn't our Tana list off as one of the prutas yeshivas hadayanim? It says gezel, meaning that is the amount of money that we deal with in the Neimanis. So obviously that would also be relevant to yeshivas hadayanim. Frank Gemara, I don't understand you. The same way you would know a shavar pruta applies to yeshivas hadayanim from Gezel, you should also know that it applies to Aveda. Yet the Mishnah did list Aveda. Why? Gzeila and Aveda, we need a special reason why the Mishnah lists them off, even though you could know one from the other. Gezel is because Agazel mechaver shavar pruta v'nishbaloi yoylichenu acher v'afilu l'madai. The chiddush is not that there's a din zela and you can run him and din. The chiddush is that you even have to do whatever it takes to deliver the gzela to him, the ashava to him, before you can have a kapara. And the reason why the Mishnah listed Aveda is because Metzia Aveda Shavapruta Chayv Lahachriz the Af Al Gav Dizol. Even though, yes, when you found it as Rukh Shavapruta, but when you're about to take out the ad in the newspaper to announce it, the value of the Aveda dropped below Shavapruta. The Mishnah tells you Chiddush that even there you still mechuyev to be makrish it because when you found it, it was worth a fruit. Why didn't the Levi list Aveda B'Pruta as one of the Prutas? Because Tani Gezel, it's included in Gezel. It says Gezel, so why do we need to say Yeshivas Hadayanim? The Gemara Yeshivas Hadayanim it's Tzrichalei. There's a special chiddush in Yeshivas Hadayanim. Lafuchim with Rav Katina to teach us that we don't hold like Rav Katina. Rav Katina Bezdin is kakin afilu lepachos mishavaput. Rav Katina said that Bezdin will even engage in a case that's less than a shavaput. Frank Gemara Levi my time Katoni hektish. Why didn't Levi list off Me'ila behektish bepruta as one of his items? The Terajis bechulun kamari bekachim loy kamari. We're speaking about chulun and not kachim. Frank Gemara Elotana did done the kamari bekachim. Our Tana is speaking about kachim because our Tana did list the pruta of Me'ila. Nisni meiser bepruta. So why doesn't it list that meiser? The minimum amount of meiser that you could be machalo is a shavapruta. Zok Gemara command Amar ein bechum shay pruta. Because maybe our Mishnah holds that the chaimish has to be a pruta, meaning the keren has to be 4 prutas. In fact, Gemara listening chaimish meiser bepruta. So they talk about the chaimish of the meiser is bepruta. That's also an item that's a pruta. Gemara bekaina kamari b'chaimish like kamari. Our Mishnah is discussing only the keren, not talking about the chaimish. Period. Now let's get into Rav Katina's halacha. Let's look at the shaila of how much does a case have to be worth before Bezdin engages. Gupa. Rav Katina, Bezdin is kakin, afilu lepachos mishavapruta. Bezdin will engage in a case even though it's less than a shavapruta. Masav Rava. We have a pasuk that says davka by kachim, even less than a shavapruta is an issue. Because it says in the pasuk, v'esasher chatam in hakodesh yishale, and turning on to Amud Beis. Rabbi's pachas b'shavarudali shavain l'kodesh in aval hayid loy. So you see, not like Rav Katina, you see pachas b'shavarudali Bezdin does not engage in. Zok Gemara li itmar hachi itmar. Amar Rav Katina im huzkaku Bezdin l'shavarudali. Then goymerin afilu l'pachas b'shavarudali. Avada Bezdin doesn't engage less than shavarudali. But once they start engaging in a din, even if in the process of the din it turns out that pachas b'shavarudali, either because the whole claim is analyzed and it's brought down, or because there's a counterclaim of pachas b'shavarudali, there the Bezdin will engage. So talking about tchilas hadin b'inam pruta. In order for Bezdin to first engage in a case, there has to be at least valued of pruta. But Gemar din, once they're in the entire, if it turns out that the whole shayla is less than a pruta, b'inam pruta, they continue the paskin once they start. There's 5 chumshin, 5 places where you pay an extra 20%. Anyway, truma. If one eats truma, we learned that if you eat truma b'shoigeg, you have to pay back the kohen with chulin that will become kodesh. And not only do you pay back with chulin the amount of fruit that he ate, he adds a 5th as well. With trumas meiser, the same thing happens if you eat trumas meiser, and the same thing happens if you eat trumas meiser sholdemai, which is only kodesh with your abundant anyway. V'yachala v'abikurim moisav chaimish. These are all things that have the din of truma, and they're one category. So this is the first of 5. All these items are counted as one item because they're all b'toyers true. The next category is if you're part of your own neter revai or meiser sheni. Moisav chaimish, you add a chaimish. The third category is if you're part of something that you're makdish. The fourth category is if you're moil b'hektish. And then the fifth category is which is the case of Hashem Zelis that we've discussed many times. Amarava. Rebbe Lozer had a kasha on this Mishnah. Trumas Meiser Shaldamai. It's all a Durabana. So why is it that they treat it like a deraisa and they say that you have to add a chaimish if you eat it? Do Rabbanan make their dinim the Rabbanan like a deraisa? Maybe it's going according to Reb Meir. The Amar Asu Chacham Chizik L'Devrei K'Shal Torah. Reb Meir holds, in fact, that the Rabbanan do treat their exeris like a deraisa, and you see this by Gittin. Why? The Tanya maybe get Medina Sayyam. If you bring get Medina Sayyam, they made a gezerah the Chachamim that you have to say the Fani Nechta. What if the person, the shliach, violated the requirement that the Rabbanan put on? The halach is Yosy v'avlad mamzer the verb Meir. We treat it like a deraisa. We make the man divorce his wife, and if they have a child, it's a mamzer. Even though this whole thing is just at the corner, we treat the child like he's a mamzer because we look at it like this woman remarried and she was still a neshesish. So you see that the Rabbanan gave chizik l'devrayim in the Torah. The Chachamim ain't a vlad mamzer. The vlad's not a mamzer. Keted yasa. What should you do? Either according to Reb Meir, what should you do before she remarries to solve this problem? If the get was given and they didn't say b'fani nechtam, or according to the Chachamim to avoid him having to divorce his wife. Zok to Gemara, you know what you should do? Yasa. Keted yasa. Yitlena mimeno. The shliach should take the get back from the woman. And they should give it to her again. The shliach should give it to her again in front of two edim. And this time he should do it right. The do-over. Zok to Gemara, I don't understand. Isn't that severe? Just because he violated the Kodesh Chachamim and he didn't say b'fani nechtav, that makes the blood of mamzer, that makes her mamash and neshish that remarried. That's exactly what Reb Meir says. If you change an iota from what the Chachamim said, how a get must be given, Yosy v'avlad mamzer. He has to divorce his wife if she married somebody else after this get, and the vlad will be a mamzer. So therefore, we found precedent to making a rabbanic halacha chaymer k'shal Torah, and that would also explain why the trumas meiser of demai has a din of regular trumas meiser, and you have to add a chaymish. Most of Reb Sheshes asked the kasha. I'm going to demonstrate to Reb Sheshes that their mayor is actually makel when it comes to demai, because the Brisa says regarding demai, mechalel lenoisa kesef al kesef, nechoshes al nechoshes, kesef al nechoshes unechoshes al pairs. You're allowed to be mechalel demai in ways that regular ma'asheni you would never be able to be mechalel, like kesef on kesef, nechoshes on nechoshes, or kesef on nechoshes, or nechoshes on pairs. And then the yachsu v'yiftas ha-pairs to Reb Meir. According to Reb Meir, you can be put to the pairs at the end, even if these pairs are not in Yerushalayim, and then you could be put to them, and then take money up to Yerushalayim. You'll have to take those pairs up to Yerushalayim. Correct? The Gemara. So we're going to demonstrate this is very lenient to allow, for Reb Meir to allow the Mai to be mechol nechoshes al kesef. How do I know it's lenient? Because I'm going to demonstrate to Reb Meir that normal Ma'aser Sheni, you would never be able to do this. But to not be learned, you have two sloim, silver sloim. One is Ma'aser Sheni, which you cannot use here, only in Yerushalayim, and one is regular chulin, and you don't know which is which, so that means you can't use either one right now. So how do you clarify this? How do you separate the chulin from the Ma'aser Sheni? What you do is as follows: maybe b'salamoids, bring nechoshes coins that are equal in value to the seller. Vaymer and say, kol makom sheyeshno selah shal ma'aser sheni. Whichever one of these two sloim or ma'aser sheni, I want to take the kedusha off it and I want to put it on this copper. Michulelas al mois halol. Now you have two silver coins that are both chulin. Now we don't want to leave the Meiser Sheni Kedusha on the copper. Copper gets ruined, so you need to put it back onto a coin. So Uber is a Yafa Shabbat. You pick out of the two silver coins, you pick the nicest one. And then you transfer the Kedusha from the copper back on to the coin, to the silver coin. So what are we doing over here? We're redeeming silver with copper and copper with silver. And that's a no-no. Now, why are you allowed to do it over here? Turning on to Amar Aleph, Mipnei, and we're going to turn on to Nun Vav Amar Aleph. Mipnei Sha'amru, they said, Mechalel Oisai Kesav al Nechoishes Midoich. You know why we allow you to do it? Midoich, because we're in a tight spot. We're stuck. We don't know which one is the Ma'aser Sheni. We will not leave the Kedusha on the copper. Like we said earlier, you transfer the Kedusha back from the copper back onto Kesef. Katani Mios, what does the Brisa say? You're only allowed to do this, the Mechal from silver onto copper, because we're in a tight spot. Midoichik in, Shaloi Midoichik Loi. Yes, so you see quite clearly that Ma'aser Sheni, you would never be able to do this. Yet, Demai Lachatchila, you can do it. So you see clearly that Reb Meir is not machmer by Demai. If anything, he's mekel by Demai. Reb Yosef, there are ways in which Reb Meir is machmer. That's why if you eat the trubus ma'aser of Demai, you got to pay a chaimish. But there's also ways in which they're mekel, like Abichil. Reb Yosef, Apapisha mekel, Reb Meir b'pijoy. You're right, Reb Meir is talking mekel in the halachas of being pointed to Demai. Yes. But machmer hu b'achilosei. But you see clearly that he's very machmer about someone eating it if he's not supposed to. The Tanya we looked in the Brisa, lo yitiru limkor demai el l'sito moda. The only person who's allowed to sell demai is a massive broker, because it's understood that if you buy from a massive broker, you have to be mafresh your own trumas and maishers. So therefore, no one's going to be nichshol. Ubalabayis, but a balabayis. Benkach ubenkach torch laser. The Reb Meir, even a balabayis who's selling in large quantities, you don't say he's like a sitar. We're machmer, and we say that anyone buying from this balabayis, the balabayis has to take off ma'aser before he sells it. Why? Because we're afraid someone's going to use it. So you see, Reb Meir is very concerned that someone shouldn't eat this when he's not allowed to. Look at that, Reb Meir is machmer. The Reb Meir. So now Rabbi Yosef answered Rabbi Sheshes Kasha by saying that in fact, even though you do find a leniency Lagabe Hilchas Chilul of Demai, but Lagabe being makbid on not eating it, there Rabbi Meir is very, very makbid. Now we have another kasha from Ravina. Maser Ravina. Halakayach min anachtoin maaser min achamal al. You bought from a nachtoin buys breads and he sells them. So you could take maaser from a chamal al, from a warm bread on a cold bread, even though it's possible that even though the warm bread is high quality, it's fresh, the cold bread is low quality. So you would think that you're not allowed to use a lower quality bread, a cold bread, to be matir the good bread. Then he also says, Rav Meir, even if there's different type of pans that the bread was baked in, which would indicate that they came from different vendors, you're still allowed to be ma'aser them together, divei Rav Meir, which seems to indicate that we're not worried of taking ma'aser from one batch that we bought from vendor A on another batch from vendor B, even though it's possible one of them is school and one of them is teva. So for there's a simple explanation why Reb Meir wasn't worried about it. Because Reb Eloi taught us, how do you know that if you're talking from raw and yofa, it's no problem? It says in the pasuk, you shouldn't get an avera when you're being mafresh trumas and maishus. What would be the avera? If being mafresh from bad on good wouldn't work, there wouldn't be an avera. You tried, but you didn't succeed. But since it says that you get an Avera, it must be that it works. So that's good. But what about the next halacha of Meir said? It's a huge kula. You might be using two different vendors. One of them could have been mafresh, one of them wasn't mafresh. That's a huge kula. So how could you say that Reb Meir is machmer when it comes to being played the Ma'aser Sheni? You see clearly here a huge chumrah. Omer Abaye, Zok Abaye, let's take stock of what we had here. We started off with a kasha from Rebbe Lozer. Where do you find such a chumrah that we treated Rabban like a deraisa? Then we have the teretz of Shmuel, who says, what do you mean? You have Reb Meir, who says the woman is a neshish and a child's a mamzer. Then we had Reb Sheshes, who asked the kasha to demonstrate that Reb Meir is really mekel by the Mai. And then we had a teretz from Rabbi Yosef who says that there's a difference between the Hilchas Chilul, where Reb Meir is mekel, versus the concern about eating Isser, where Reb Meir is mach. And now we have the kasha of Ravina. So Abaye basically grades all of these steps if he likes these pshatim or not. So Amar Abaye, Rabbi Eliezer, the first person who asked the kasha, Shaper Kakosha. He had a very good kasha. Where do you find by the Rabbanon treats it like a derais? I like that kasha. The problem is Shmuel loy shaper kameshani loy. Shmuel's teretz is not a good teretz. Why? The kasha of the Rabbi Eliezer Misa the b'dei Shemayim. Rabbi Eliezer wanted to know where do you see such a chumrah by Trumas Meiser, which the maximum Isser is Misa b'dei Shemayim by the Raisa. Umeshani loy, and he illustrated chumrah Shmuel by Mrs. Bezdin, because of course a nation says Mrs. Bezdin. What's the raya? Dilma shiny Mrs. Bezdin the Chamira. Maybe there's a chomer. Maybe Reb Meir is machmir dafka by Gershon, because it's a Indian that could lead to Mrs. Bezdin. So that's not a good teretz. I don't like Shmuel's teretz. Then Reb Sheshes asked the kasha. I don't like this kasha. Reb Sheshes lo shaber kamoisav lo. The Ka'amri inu misa. We're discussing eating Trumas Meiser, which carries a Chiyav Misa B'dei Shemayim. Umoisav Reb Sheshes lab, and Reb Sheshes asked the kasha from Chilo, where if you're not Mechal Ma'aser Sheni, and you ate payers of Ma'aser Sheni out of Yerushalayim, there's only a lab there. Now, by a comment on Reb Sheshes, I don't like Reb Sheshes' kasha, but L'maisa Reb Yosef, who answered the kasha, answered good. Reb Yosef Shaber Kamashani. And now Abaye wants to analyze Ravina. Ravina, I don't understand what your kasha is. Why do you think you're demonstrating a kula according to Reb Meir? Instead of asking a kasha from Nachtoin, that seems to illustrate that Reb Meir is mekel, look at the very next case in the same brayta that you quoted, the same mission that you quoted, that shows a chumrah according to Reb Meir. If you buy from a syndicator, he buys bread from many different sources and then sells them. You have to take a separate ma'aser from each one. So you see very clearly, in fact, that Reb Meir holds l'chumrah. So why you ask me a kasha from a school or ask from a chumrah? Now we need to know what's the difference. The teretz is this is not chumrah and kula. There's a logical explanation why Reb Meir was mekel by Nachtoin and why he was machmer by Palter. By Palter. Palter betrayed Tlaza Gavri's often. The Palter buys from many different suppliers, so you do really need to be concerned about being the master from one or the other. But Nachtoin Nami Mechad Gavri Hudazov. The Nachman buys from one person, the Nachtoin, and therefore you don't have to worry about being master from one person on another. Rav Amar Shmuel Shabbat Kamashani. Even though Abaye didn't like Shmuel's teretz, because why you bring me a raya from Misos Bezdin of Gershon to Misa B'dei Shemayim of eating Truma, it's a good raya. Shem Misa Ba'olam. They're both Misa. They're both comparable, and Shmuel's teretz would have been a good teretz. The following items do not have the rules of Ainah applying to them. Havadim v'ashtaris v'akarkois v'hakteshos. And not only do they have Ainah, ein lehem tashlumei kefel. If you steal them, you don't pay kefel. Lo tashlumei above v'chamisha. If you stole an animal of hektish, you don't pay dalpeh. Shomer chinam and nishba. The halachas of Shor Mechinim don't apply. So even if he was Pesheya, even if he was a Gdeva Vaveda, he wouldn't have to swear, he would be parted without swearing. When they say Sachin, Mishalim, Asher Sachin would not pay for Gdeva Vaveda. Rab Shimon says there are certain kachim that do follow the subject of Ainoah because it does impact the personal finances of somebody. And Zok Rab Shimon turning on to Amud Beis. What if you said, you're responsible for that oila. If it gets lost or stolen, you have to replace it. So that's considered the money of a yachid. Therefore, there would be a din on it. But if you did a rezu, so even if something happens to it, you're not chayiv. On there's no din. If you sold the Sevatara Behema or a gem, there's no din for that, and we'll see the Gemara. Why? Only these items. How do we know that there is no din for karklos? We learned the Brisa. It says in the parsha of Ainoah, the focus on the miyad. You bought something from the hand of Amisecha, your friend. So we learned that this whole parsha of Ainoah only applies by davar hanikta miyad liyad. Something that you're literally handing over. Metalton you hand over. Karka you don't hand over. You can't hand over a karka. You can transfer ownership, but you don't physically hand it over like you would do a watch. Avodim don't have a din I know because avodim are always compared to karkos. Yotu stories, there's no din I know in stories. You have to sell the actual item, not a representation of a choiv. You're selling the actual item. Yotu stories, you're not buying or selling anything. You're just selling a representation of a proof that there's a loan outstanding. That if you sold the star for the paper itself, if you sold stars to a boyson who uses paper to wrap his summerman and to put around people's neck to make them smell good, there would be enough. Of course, you're selling an item. These little papers, they're worth a pruta. They're not worth a lot of money. So Rav Kahana holds there's no deny no prutos, Kamash V'Lam, that there is a no for prutos. Sheish another prutos. Hakdeshos. Where do you know that there's no deny no behekish? Amakar It says in the pasuk, the lashon pasuk is. Let's find the pasuk inside. It says, Al toinu ish es ochiv, your brother. Hektish is not your brother. Ochiv lo hektish. Maskav lo rabba barman. I don't understand. How do you know that only metalfim are covered by a no? Because it says miyad misecha, and that means dafka, something you're physically handing over. Is that so? Is that what miyad means? Every time it says yad in the Torah, it means the actual handing over of a physical object. I'll show you a pasuk in Novi that clearly it doesn't mean that. We talk about the Melech Moav seized all the land away from the Melech Sichon, and then he took it from his hand. He actually picked up the land in his hand. That's impossible. Miyadi just means from his possession. So maybe when the Torah says it doesn't literally mean he handed it to you. It means he transferred ownership. And maybe the din I know, in fact, does apply to karkos. Zok Gemara, that doesn't make sense what you're saying. So you want to make an argument because of the pasuk in Novi that Yodi doesn't literally mean handing it over? I'm going to show you two places where it's quite clear that the Tana accepted that when it says Yodi, it means Yad Mamish. Example number one. If you find a ganav red-handed with the money that he stole, he pays kefir. The Brisa tells us, I would only know that he's chayiv if you catch him red-handed, literally, you find the ganev in his hand. What if you didn't find it in his hand? What if you found it in his property? How do you know he's still chayiv kefir? So you see, you need a pasuk to tell you that yodi doesn't mean literal. Because without the matei to matei, the default pshat in yad is literal. Time because of Rechmona and Bimoti Timotzi. Halava Chiavamina Koleka because of Yoda Yodi Mamishu. So that's one raya that Yad means Yad Mamish. V'sutanya, by Gershon, says with nothing but Yoda, you have to put the get in the woman's hand. Ainli Yoda, I would only know if you literally put the get in her hand. Gaga Chater V'Kafifa Menayin. How do you know if you put it into her property? She's also Mugareshes. Hamadom V'Notzim to come up with. So once again, time because of Rechmona V'Notzim. Halavachi, if it didn't say V'Notzim, Havamina, the assumption would be the default is Kol Eicha because of Yoda Yodi Mamish. Hello, that's Takalocha. Kol Yoda is Yodi Mamishu. And in fact, there is no denial by Karka. What about by Novi? Why it said Yoda there? The shiny Yozim, the Lakal Memarachi. Elamishusoi. Yeah, in the Novi, there's no way you can attach Yoda as literally meaning Yoda. So there you attach Mishusoi. But whenever you can touch it up as Yodi Mamish, clearly it's Yodi Mamish. Boy, Rabzeir. Skiris Yesh Lo Eino. What if I'm doing a rental contract and I'm overcharging on rent? Is there a did I know for that? You talk tomorrow. Memka Arma Rachmana is only by a permanent sale. Avaloy Skiris. Ayam Aloy not even Skiris is subject to the rules of Aino. Amalei Abaye Mixim Memkar Loilum. Doesn't say V'chisemkar Memkar Loilum Yara Bisecha. V'chisemkar Memkar. Memkar Stamaksiv. Ainami B'yoymei Mechirahi. Skiris is a Mechira for the day. Or for whatever the term of the rental is. Boy Rava. Chitin V'zoran Bekar. What if I bought wheat kernels from you and they were planted in the ground? So is that karka or is that metalton? Now, yesh l'maynoy, ein l'maynoy. Zoklamar, do you say come on the shodin b'chadid domyan? It's as if it's in a jug, in a jar, and it's regular metalton. Yesh l'maynoy. Adilma batlinu al gav ira. Maybe they're buttoned to the karka, and then there's no dinayno. Hechidom effective. What exactly happened? Ilaymin abrahu shadoi ba'ashita. If it's speaking where I tell you I put 6 seeds in the ground for you, and he paid me, of course, and they didn't come along and say, only put 5. That's not I know. That's outright theft, and therefore sure the Mecca was bottled. Anything you count, and I gave less than the count that was agreed upon. That's called theft and about this. So what's the case that we're clearing about? What happened was, I said, I put enough seeds on your field to suit the amount of area you have. I planted it properly. And then when we analyzed it, we realized there was a mistake and he didn't actually put enough seeds there. So there the shaila is yesh lo no, ain't lo no, because that's not a davar shavaminian of Mishkol. That's an assessment of whether or not the property is properly seeded. So Zok to Gemara, that is the shaila. Do you say command the shod of a chadadamian, and therefore it's a metalton yesh lo no, adama batlinu agavara, and therefore it is not subject to the rules of it. Frankly, now that we have this shaila lagabe ayna, how about nishbana lenor nishbana le? Would you make a shavua if there's a moed b'mitzvah's case involving such a situation? Because by shavua we know as well you don't swear on karkonis. Do we say command the shadin b'chadidamian and therefore it's a metaltlin nishbana le? Adilma batlinu agav ara, or maybe it's bottled to the karka and you don't swear for karkonis nishbana le. Now the Gemara has another interesting shaila, which is davar b'idei matoy. We say the Leviah strikes again because it's discussing today. Today is the day of the Omer. Today is the second day of Pesach. Omer matiron, ein Omer matir. Will the Omer be matir this? So you planted it. Hechadav, what was the case? You planted these seeds, and we want to know if the Omer passes by, second day of Pesach passes by. Do we say these seeds and what they grow, what the seeds grow, is already considered Yosham because it passed the Omer or not? So Hechadav, Ida Asher is Tanina, Ida Asher is Tanina. Whether it took root, we have a brayse that tells us halacha, and if it didn't take root, we have a brayse that tells us halacha. If they took root before the Omer, this plant when it grows, it's already Yosha. But if it didn't take root yet and the Omer passed, you gotta wait till next year. So that can't be our shaila because that's quite clear what the shaila, what the halacha is. So tomorrow, our shaila is the chetztinu v'zerinu kodem Omer. You took these seeds and you planted them before the Omer. And we're not discussing what grows out of them. That we have rices for. We want to know what happens if you decide that you want to take them back out of the ground and eat them. So the Omer passed, but they were underground. They didn't take root. And the question is, if I want to collect these seeds, do they get the heter of the Omer? Maybe not, because they were underground. Let's go on to Amud Aleph, on to Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. Could you take them out of the ground and eat them? Do you say, come on, they're like in a jar, and therefore, the heter of the Omer took care of them, and now they're Yerashon? Or maybe once in the ground, they're no longer subject to the heter of the Omer, and therefore we consider them Chadash. The Gemara answers with a Teiku. Baruch Hashem, we did two blot. We made up the two blot of the first 2 days of Yom Tov. Tonight is the first night of Chol Pesach. And tomorrow morning we will learn Daf Zion. Everyone should have a wonderful Moyed, a wonderful Yom Tov, and enjoy the beautiful Gemaras.